what's going on? David Avalon here with Robert Drysdale for another edition of Breaking the Guard. We're on episode number 21. And
goes quick.
Yeah.
Feels like we started yesterday because we actually started talking about the project like over a year ago, really.
We did, yeah. We didn't actually start releasing the episodes until like 6 months later.
After we started filming, because the first episode was Felipe Pena?
Yeah.
And Felipe Pena was here, but at least 8 months ago, right?
Yeah.
That was a while ago.
It was a while ago, so...
We'll be consistent. That's the most important thing. We talked about is like when we start, we wanted to be consistent and we wanted to release at least one episode a week, which we've been doing. And I think we had like 4 or 5 lined up. And now we're like, we film and then Dave edits and, puts it out the next day. So
Yep. So we're trying to crank them out for you guys who also... You might not notice it, but we've moved to a new location.
Yes, if it looks better, it's because it is. There's a lot more room back here.
Yeah.
I'll tell you guys, I have a casita at my house, and I have a lot of times like kids that come over to train jiu-jitsu and, hey, Rob, I need a place to crash. I'm like, sure, crash in the casita. So me and Dave are going to film sometimes, and that's the studio, right? So every now and then you got to wake them up, like, hey, man, you go hang out somewhere else. We got to film. So it was really inconvenient. Dave just bought a beautiful home, like 4 minutes away from my house.
Yeah.
It's like walking distance, right? So it's perfect. And so now we got much more space. It's funny because like this guy just texted me. He's like, hey, Rob, you want to film? I'm like, yeah, sure, come over. I completely forgotten like all the stuff was over here already. So it's the first episode at Dave's house.
Yeah. So some topical news that we have going on. The UFC 245 or 235?
Can't keep up, man.
I forget. It's one of the fives. But just passed with a big event, Kamaru Usman with Colby Covington. And spoiler alert, if you don't want to hear the result, Usman won by TKO in the 5th round with like less than a minute left. And I didn't get to watch the fight, unfortunately. I was busy moving stuff here, but I did see some of the highlights. And one of the things that drew my attention to it was that apparently Usman broke Colby Covington's jaw in the 3rd round. And he fought essentially 2.5 or 3 rounds really through with a broken jaw in a fight that had 0 wrestling, 0 takedown attempts from either guy. They just stood toe to toe and tried to rock him, sock him. So I don't think if you've never had your jaw broken, which fortunately me and Rob haven't, but from what I hear, it sucks.
I can't imagine because I think the biggest thing was not even the pain, but the knowing that your jaw is broken. It's just like hanging there by your tendon or the skin or whatever, right? And you're still getting punched repeatedly because you're in a slug fight. Like it's not exactly like you said. They're not like pummeling on the fence. Like that your jaw is just hanging there by a thread, and there's someone still punching it.
Yeah, and apparently the fracture was just like here. They had the picture of the punch that they believe was the one that fractured it, and it was like a right hand. They just caught him like kink, like right in the middle of the jaw, so the fracture was here. I mean, like you said, it's because I imagine you probably can't clench your jaw well with the amount of pain you have. So now every other shot's gonna be worse. Because, you're gonna be your jaw's gonna be flinging around everywhere. And then too, in the back of your head, every time you get hit, it's gonna be brutal.
Yeah, like it's got to mess with. I mean, to keeping the composure. Like I really admire that somebody can do that. It's a tough. I wonder if the doctors would have stopped it had they known. That's the question. I don't know.
I mean, that's another concern, right? Because the closest I've had to that was just a broken nose. And the pain of it didn't really bother me. Because a lot of times in the fight, the adrenaline's just... Yeah. You're not really feeling it.
You don't feel it as much as you think you
would. I was bleeding like a faucet. And my concern was the ref actually stopped the fight. And then they had the doctor check it. And then you want to continue? I'm like, of course. But now I'm thinking, crap, if I get tagged again, I'm going to lose the fight because they're going to want to stop it. Because they've already made a big show of it. So it's like another thing you have to worry about already. I think the thing that was interesting with that fight is that neither of them even attempted to go to the ground once.
I suspect that they respected each other's wrestling too much, maybe, and they didn't want to. They knew it was going to be a long, difficult fight. It's 5 rounds, right? So they probably, I don't want to waste a lot of energy trying to take this guy down because I don't feel like I can hold him down long enough to actually cause any damage, right, or win the round at least. So probably they're both looking at each other and going, we have a better shot at just, banging it out till like the end of the 5th round, and then, win a decision. I think was their strategy for both of them walking in, because anyone who has fought, or anyone who trains, knows how much energy goes into trying to take someone down. It knocks the wind out of you, because, it's one thing to move something that's heavy that doesn't mind being moved, like a heavy bag, right? Whereas like someone that's weighs as much as you, who doesn't want to get taken down, is doing everything in their power for you not to move them. That's a whole different story. And it really wears you out. And then fighters know this, so there's a reason why they're not too invested in that, especially when they know they're going against a high-level wrestler like they both are.
Yeah. And a lot of people expected that as much because they're very similar. Like, even their records, I don't know if you noticed, they both had the same record. I think they're both 15-1, or they were. They have a common opponent. Like, I guess Usman lost to a guy actually I used to train, Jose Caceres out of Miami, by rear naked choke. And then Colby lost to this other guy, Warley Alves, by a guillotine or something. But then each of them have beat the other guy.
Okay.
And they both had the same submission record, same knockout record, same everything. So, and then the strategy is obviously the same too. So it's like almost like a mirror image fighting each other.
That's interesting.
Style-wise.
Yeah.
Character-wise, they're completely different.
Because Usman is born in Nigeria, is that correct?
I'm not sure. I know he's obviously of Nigerian descent. Because I know
his name too, gives him what. But I'm wondering if he was born there and he was raised in the U.S. or if it's just his parents are immigrants from Nigeria. I don't know the story.
Went to college in here, and that's the whole joke with the Marty thing. I don't know if you heard with Ben Askren. Ben Askren on a press conference called him Marty because apparently when he was at college he was called Marty. So he's like, I always knew him as Marty. Now he's suddenly Usman. I'm like, okay, whatever, But
that's funny. I know that.
So there was a lot of Marty references referring to Usman, So
did they wrestle together or no?
No, because they were different divisions. So like the other criticism was that Usman's a Division II wrestler, and then both Ben Askren and also Colby are Division I wrestlers.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it's not exactly equivalent, but some people will say minor leagues versus major leagues. But it's not that big. There is a gap, but it isn't that big.
That big of a gap, yeah.
And especially when now we're talking about MMA, I think all that kind of fades away, Because
you can have a wrestling style that is very geared towards MMA. Like you can have a boxing style that's more geared towards MMA. Yeah. Same for jiu-jitsu. Same for just about anything, right? I remember that, some wrestlers early on in the early days of MMA, there were wrestlers that were like Olympic caliber making a transition to MMA, and they weren't doing well.
No.
And then we've seen tons of jiu-jitsu guys that, try to make that transition. Same thing. They didn't do so well. And then you get guys, speaking jiu-jitsu wise here, like guys that were not as dominant in BJJ as they were in MMA, like guys like Nogueira. His career was in MMA. He was good at jiu-jitsu, but he was never like a top 10 guy, right? But he was probably the most successful jiu-jitsu guy ever making MMA. He won a UFC and a Pride belt, right? So I think it has to do with how you fight and how your original style translates into MMA, right?
Yeah.
It's because it's a different ballgame. Like it doesn't matter how you put it. Like all wrestlers, I think probably the ones out of all styles that transition best to MMA, if you ask me. Overall, a lot of gray area there, but like overall, if you had to really press, I think it's fair to say, right? But even so, like I imagine a lot of guys, because they just think, how good of a wrestler you are, doesn't mean you like getting punched in the face. You can be super tough, very well conditioned, super athletic, and then someone hits you in the face and you break right away.
Yeah, and the fighting chain, like the one wrestler I can think of as an example that doesn't wrestle really well, to be honest, is Dan Henderson. If you look at him, he gets taken down like early. If you watch early UFC and Prides, he'll get taken down like easily. He doesn't really do like he gets big throws in sometimes, but like he's like the most wrestler in MMA, and he's known for the atomic right hand.
Yeah,
he's not known for his wrestling in MMA.
That's true.
So he's a world class wrestler. Yeah. So I remember I watched him like, how come he's getting taken down? Like,
and that's such a common theme too. Like I've seen so many guys at Extreme Couture. I'm not going to mention names. I used to train there back in the day. And these guys come from collegiate wrestling, outstanding records. And you can see them slowly transitioning into becoming strikers. And next thing you know, it's like, I think they're losing their wrestling. It's like, I can't speak for Dan Henderson, but I was watching some of these guys. And because I trained with them for years. And I think that the reason why, it wasn't that just that their boxing got better, their kickboxing got better, is that they were actually losing their wrestling skills. Because skills is just very much like languages. You'll forget them. You'll lose them. Just like anything. You'll forget your mother tongue. Imagine that.
Yeah.
You don't think you'll forget jiu-jitsu? So, any kind of skill set, you're either improving or you're losing them. It's just a fact. And I think a lot of guys, either because they can't stand wrestling anymore, or they feel that they're never going to lose a skill set, or maybe there's not a coach making them do all those drills that they hated, or whatever the case, a lot of guys lose their original skill set. Vitor Belfort. What is Vitor Belfort known for?
He's known for his striking, yeah. But
he came from jiu-jitsu. Like, he was like a national juvenile champion in Brazil as a blue belt, back in 96, whenever that was. But like very early on in his MMA career, even though he's always representing jiu-jitsu, I mean, he has like very few submissions. Like, he was always known as a striker, right?
Yeah, I think the first mental image I have of him is doing that Jeet Kune Do straight blast, pretty much, where he just machine gun Vanderlei, you know what I mean?
Till this day, I think that's one of the most beautiful knockouts in the history of the sport.
Yeah, but that was funny because that is straight from Jeet Kune Do. Like, because if I remember correctly, I don't think he even had his hands horizontal like regular like boxing.
Yeah,
he just went like wah wah wah. That's like straight blasted.
Awesome.
And just ran him.
Because I think he landed. Like, if you're gonna know what we're talking about, we're talking UFC Brazil, 1998, right? Yeah. So this is old school. And early in the fight, first minute, right, from memory, Vitor Belfort lands something on Vanderlei, and it rocks his head back. Yeah. It's the kind of thing that when some of that happens, it's like, okay, I'm rocked, and maybe the guy follows up with a combo, but normally it stops and the guy recovers, right?
Yeah.
But Vitor actually, I don't know if you read the situation very quickly. I have to watch it again, or if you'd already have that in mind. But before the first punch comes back, the second one's already coming out, and he just blasts Vanderlei across the cage and drops him at the other end of the cage, and boom, end of the fight. It was like, what, 8-punch combo kind of thing?
Yeah, that's right. It was ridiculous. Yeah. And even with the UFC being as crazy as it was in the early days, there wasn't anything quite like that yet.
No.
There wasn't anybody who just literally machine gun punched somebody straight through. And it made him a legend.
Yeah, and even
it's a cult phenomenon.
Yeah, but even like high level boxers that transition to the UFC, they were not doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, how many boxers went to the UFC and were doing what Vitor was doing back in the day? Yeah. I can't think of anyone. I mean, there might be someone that actually was that dominant with their hands, but Vitor was really something else. And at a stage where MMA, the striking level wasn't there. It's nowhere near where it is today. But something happened with that guy's boxing where he got it quick. He just had a gift for it, whatever the case. Very fast, very athletic, obviously. But, till this day, I think he's very, very impressive. Vitor, to me, is one of the most impressive MMA fighters of all time. I'll tell you why. I think he's had the longest career out of everyone. I think he had his first fight at 16. He's like 42 now and still fighting. When's the last fight? So it's, when you think of like who's fought as much, talk Dan Henderson, he fought a lot.
Yes.
But I don't think his career was as long as Vitor's, because Vitor started before.
Yes, he did. Vitor, I never thought of that, Rob, but you're right, man. Like, he's been in there for a long time.
Who's fought? Yeah. I look at the guys like Frank Mir, and Frank's Mir been fighting forever. But he hasn't been fighting as long as Vitor. I can't think. Randy could say, you name Chuck Liddell, find someone who's fought longer than Vitor Belfort. I can't think of anyone.
Yeah, and especially because of how many like generations back, really, because he was like just after, I would say, like the first wave of UFC fighters, right? Because you had UFC 1 through like 10, which was like a whole. It was
it was
very rough.
Yes, it was like a whole different sport. Like, it really, I feel like the birth of MMA in a lot of ways, the modern MMA or 21st century, whatever you want to call it, was after like Tito and like Chuck and that's when the UFC really began. It looks a lot more what it looks like today to me. But the early UFCs, even though to me they're more fun to watch, to be frank, I'd much rather watch Royce Gracie and Agi fighting a sumo wrestler or a boxer.
It is much more interesting.
It's more fun, entertaining to me. But like it was a different art almost, like something completely separate to what we're watching today.
Yeah, we were seeing a lot of style versus style.
Yeah.
Right. So like you say, it wasn't really MMA yet. It was mixed martial arts in the sense that there were different martial arts fighting each other, but it wasn't one person in multiple disciplines.
Yes.
That really wasn't there yet. At least anybody successful. All the successful guys were strong specialists that were just using the specialty to overcome everybody else. But yeah, once Tito and Frank Shamrock started coming around, those guys started to blend things well together.
It became more sophisticated for sure during that phase of MMA.
But even Vitor, I think he was before Tito, right?
Because he goes before.
Because he fought Tank Abbott, And I remember
No,
Tank Abbott's an
Vitor-
old school guy.
I want to say
yeah.
Vitor was in there, UFC 8, 9, something like that. I can't remember. He was the youngest UFC champion. Everyone gives John Jones credit.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But I guess it's different because... Sorry, guys, choked on water. But, it's a belts, it's a weight system, right? But Vitor had a UFC belt when he was 19. He's never counted as the youngest. John Jones gets that title, but Vitor at 19, he had a UFC belt. He's the youngest champion ever.
Yeah, fighting
just
with
pretty impressive when you
fighting
think
with
about
less rules and just
less rules.
Yeah. So it's definitely. I mean, he was one of those guys. I remember that he would. Oh man, like everyone he was gonna fight Tank Abbott. Everybody because Tank. If you don't know who Tank is, you still.
He would drink. The legend has it he would drink a couple beers before he walked out there.
Yeah. Just a big old beer belly.
Yeah.
But he was actually a wrestler when he was in college, and he was Tito Ortiz's coach, sort of coming up. I know Tito Ortiz when he first got in the UFC, Tank was in his corner.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So they're both from Huntington Beach.
Okay.
So there was a connection there. I'm not sure where it is, or he just bumped into him, but there was a connection there. But yeah, I remember that he was Tank had this legend for knocking people the hell out because he was one of those first guys, I think, also that would just lay people out with one punch.
He's super powerful guy. I remember that.
He fought this huge, I think it was a Hawaiian guy or Samoan or I forget his name. It was
with the ponytail. I know the name. Lost the name.
He essentially Frankenstein this guy, right? He hit him with one right hand and the guy went stiff, and he looked like a cockroach kind of with the arms and legs out.
Yep.
And I think I was one of those first crazy ass knockouts. You're like, oh man.
You know what? But just going back to Vitor, this is because Vitor is weird, strange to me because he's a jiu-jitsu guy from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, a country that doesn't have a tradition in boxing. Now it's starting, but even wrestling in Brazil is a thing now, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But because of MMA and jiu-jitsu, but it's never had a tradition in boxing like UK or the United States, for example, right? But I think Vitor in a lot of ways was a byproduct of Carlson Gracie. And the reason being is Carlson is hands down one of the most important characters, not only in BJJ, but also MMA. He was a guy who way back in the day when he was fighting, I think he did a much better job than everyone around him at understanding the importance of cross-training, disciplines, right? He was never an MMA coach. He was you train jiu-jitsu, pure jiu-jitsu. Royce Gracie was sold that way. I'm pure jiu-jitsu. I'm going to grapple you and choke you. And, you may not like this style or whatever the case, Royce Gracie was very important he was the right guy at the right time for the sport to explode. But Carlson Gracie, who cornered Royce in his first UFC, if I'm not mistaken, he was far more advanced than the rest of the family in terms of MMA. He had his guys box. He understood the importance of wrestling. He understood perfectly well that if you can't take someone down, it's pointless to be an expert on the ground. So if you look at that first generation of MMA fighters out of Brazil, if you pay close attention, where were they fighting out of? Carlson Gracie's camp, because Carlson is always a guy who was always a step ahead of the game. That's why to me he's such an interesting guy in the whole development of BJJ and MMA. And I think Vitor was the first big export product out of the Carlson Gracie team.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I didn't know that he was in Carlson Gracie was in Royce's corner.
If either the first or second or third UFC, I don't know which one it was. I believe it was the first. I think Rickson was there too. Legend has it that the reason why because Rickson is always, everyone knew that Rickson was the best one of the family at that time, right? He was the best guy. They say that, Royce was skinnier, Rickson was too buff, and it wasn't the right sell. We wanted someone who was skinny and unathletic, that was going to be the best sales pitch to an American audience, which makes perfect marketing sense.
Yeah.
Big athletic guy wins the fight, not that impressive. Skinny, unathletic looking guy wins, right? I have a different theory why that was. I think that Rorion, because Royce was so young, Rorion could control Royce in a lot of ways, in the ways he couldn't control Rickson. Rickson was the alpha dog. Yeah. It's I'm not going to, what do you mean you're my boss? Royce was this young kid. Rorion brought him over when he was 17. And I think it was easier for him to be boss's brother around just because he was less mature. He was a lot younger. I think that's the real reason. Otherwise, I think that if it came down to it, it would have been a smarter decision, a more likely for the jiu-jitsu to win if Rickson had been fighting the UFC. And it turned out it didn't work that way, and it was probably for the better.
Yeah, for sure. It is interesting that Rickson never got into the UFC. You know,
Yeah.
you would have thought that they would have put him in there, but it's probably like you said, he's kind of his own man. So I imagine he probably didn't want to be.
It's something to do with that. I think there was like some contractual issue too, where he was not allowed to fight here. They, they clash a lot, right?
Yeah.
And it's not a friendly relationship. It's on the outside they have to, present themselves that way because they benefit from that image of a tight, knitted group of people. But in reality, anyone who knows the sport knows it's not that way. I think there was some kind of contractual issue where he was not allowed to fight in the U.S. That's why he's never actually fought in the U.S. And that's why he went to Japan. Interesting thing, like just building off of that, the MMA scene in Japan kind of always existed. To say that Pride was a byproduct of the UFC, which a lot of people think, blew up in the U.S. and the Japanese go, oh, we're going to create our version of the UFC. It's not entirely true. They had the Shuto.
Yeah.
Shuto's MMA. Like just bigger gloves. That's the only difference, right? Some modify. I think some rules are slightly different. No elbows.
But you're right. They've been doing it. But the thing is, I think a lot of people confuse it, and it's easy to confuse it with the pro wrestling scene there as well.
Yeah.
Because a lot of shoots
overlapping
works. They're rigged fights or whatnot, but some of them aren't. So it's hard to say which ones were legit versus which ones aren't. I think with the whole. What you might call it, Yakuza connections to it, kind of makes everything like, you never know what's.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that, I was just talking to Highwell from Flo about this the other day, and we're talking about how like things go in full circle, right? Fake fights are not new. They go way back. In fact, catch wrestling in Brazil is the word they use to call pro wrestling. Oh. The term pro wrestling in Brazil doesn't exist. No one uses it. They use catch wrestling. Because the association between pro wrestling and catch wrestling in Brazil was so established that that's what they call it, catch. If catch means fake, right? That's what the term they use. But the Japanese were always into that, and a lot of the Japanese that were coming over, they were doing fake fights in Brazil too. Maeda included. Maeda, in fact, I think most of his fights were probably fake because they would sell more, right? The audience didn't understand fighting. A fight can be boring to a lay audience. But these fake fights in Japan always existed, right? And they're kind of coming back. I think recently Sakuraba just had a fake match in Japan. They did like a fake, staged grappling exhibition thing. And Rickson did one with Hoyler years ago in Pride. For some reason, the Japanese audience, whether they know or not, it doesn't matter at this point, really. They do buy it. Whereas in the U.S., it's slightly different. It's interesting because the MMA crowd I feel like it's very different from the pro wrestling crowd. Because there is pro wrestling, yes, it's huge. But the MMA crowd, I don't think there's a lot of crossover. I can't see something fake in the UFC and the audience enjoying it. Whereas in Pride, I could see that happening.
Yeah, I don't see UFC fans crossing over to WWE.
Yeah.
I do see it going the other way, though, obviously, because that's how Brock Lesnar became such a draw.
True.
So I think if you're like a hardcore WWE fan and then you see your favorite wrestler starts going to UFC, you have to be curious at what goes on.
Absolutely.
It wouldn't go the other way.
Ronda is in UFC really. You fight a fan like making sure he follows Ronda's pro wrestling career. No one cares.
Or Cain Velasquez.
Okay, and then no one. I didn't even know he was fighting pro wrestling. There you go.
Yeah.
It does. No one really cares. And going back to Japan, they've like that Inoki Muhammad Ali fight in Japan. When did that take place? I don't know the year. But it was the same idea of the UFC. Let's put two fighters from different styles and have them fight and see who wins. So the UFC was important, and it was the right organization at the right time. I think it was necessary, right? Was it new? No way. There's nothing new about the UFC. Yeah. These fights been going on in Japan and Brazil for... Actually, a friend of mine sent me an article a while ago. There were MMA fights in the U.S. in the 1800s. They weren't called MMA, obviously, but they were basically no holds barred, no rules. Guys were just like, you could wrestle, you could punch, you could headbutt, and this is in the 1800s. I got to find the article. He sent it to me like a while ago, and I just thought it's interesting. Like if you really want to get historical about it, you could take it back to the Greeks.
Pancration.
That was MMA. So it's interesting to me how history is cyclical. Like it goes through, like people get bored of one thing, they go on. It's like an arms race, and then go to the next. And then they go to the next, and then next they get bored. And then at some point they run out of things to do. Like you can't reinvent the wheel. So what do? They go back to square one and start all over again. I could see an audience, and I hope this doesn't happen to MMA and BJJ, but I could see an audience that is so keen on entertainment, entertain me by at any cost, that I could see, I hope this doesn't happen, but I could see something happening where fake matches become a thing again, right? Like we're kind of like going backwards in a sense. Like, oh, we know it's fake, but it's fun. Imagine we do a coordinated match where you do a flying arm bar and then I get out and I do a, heel hook on you and you get out and everything's coordinated. And I would hate if that were the case, but I wouldn't be surprised if that started happening at some point, because you have people that are so adamant about being entertained at any cost.
Oh, I thought you were going to go a different direction, a darker one. I thought, since we're going history, I thought you said we're going to go back to the Gladiator days where it's death.
Oh, have you seen those Russians? What they do? They have like one where they have like medieval armor and weapons. It's actually funny.
It is so crazy how they. And it's not just. First of all, the Russians are totally insane. Like, if you've seen, they have team MMA where they have 5-on-5.
It's incredible.
First of all, 5-on-5 is already bad enough, right? Because and the strategy always holds. Where as soon as one person loses, the whole team gets beat, because you get a double team, a triple team, and then you just get destroyed. But as if that wasn't enough, they do obstacle course MMA. I don't know if you've seen that one. Where it looks like you're looking at what is those old like Nickelodeon game shows where they have Gladiators, where they have these giant
American. What was it called? The American
Gladiators, right?
Gladiator. Yeah.
They have these giant foam podiums, and they start on top of these little giant foam things, and they start fighting there. So you see people fly down, and it's like, how are people not dying like daily with this stuff? It looks nuts, and you'll see someone gets thrown from like one story to the next, and then getting stomped.
It's entertaining though. Like, that's the thing though. I could see myself watching that and laughing. I mean, I watch the UFC. To me, it's like it's serious. It's not never funny, But I'd watch something like that, and like when I saw medieval MMA. And it's a ring. I don't know if you guys seen it or not, but it's a ring, and there's, I think it was 5-on-5, and they're all in medieval armor, and they're just, I don't know what the rules are, but it's hilarious to watch. Russia. I think there's like a series of videos on YouTube, and I think it's like only in Russia or something like that, and it's just like people doing crazy shit. It's just like crazy stuff happening over and over. They edit it into like a long 5-minute video of like crazy shit happening nonstop.
I've seen many versions of them. There's like infinite. I think the bear driving in a car. It's normal. Like, what the hell is going on? Tanks rolling down the streets. So it's wild. But what's interesting about the medieval MMA is that apparently in the actual fights there with swords, there was a ton of grappling, because the armor is very effective. Right, it's kind of not like in the movies where, like, if you're wearing full plate armor and I sack you with a sword, I'm gonna slice right through you. I always thought about that. Yeah, how do you cut through armor? It doesn't work that way. So they tend, because that's why they say you have to find the chink in the armor, right? Essentially, like, you have different plates, so you can't go through the middle of it. You have to be able to slide in between plates in certain areas, and generally, like, the sides are weaker, they're easier to get into because of the way the armbands. I might be butchering this, so if you're a historian and you're getting upset, I'm just basically saying that there is a lot more grappling involved, because essentially you're just going to be banging into each other. And the armor, besides the steel plate, has then reinforced leather banding or whatnot. So there's chainmail. So there's padding as well. Yeah. So that's why you'll watch some of these medieval fights, and they're smacking the crap at each other in the head. I'm like, in my mind, it's like, oh, that's like an instant concussion. But it's like, no, they kind of have like football helmets, so they can eat some shots. I could see that, and I imagine the grappling would be a big component in medieval warfare, because you would get exhausted after a while. You're walking, think about swinging a sword or a hammer or an axe with nothing, no weight, for like 2 minutes, and see how tired you get. Yeah. Imagine, add the armor and the adrenaline and the fact that there's someone in front of you, sometimes 5 people trying to kill you. You gas out, and I don't care how conditioned you are. You would gas out in 3 minutes. Yeah. And then after that, what are you going to do? You probably drop your weapon because you can't even pick it up, and you start just like leaning on people. And it turns into a grappling match with armor on, which sounds like a horrible idea to me. Like, I just want to take it off. Like, can I grapple without this armor? Because you can't, you can kind of hurt them. I never understood why, like, medieval warfare, like, everyone's like the sword. Like, to me, the sword is like the worst weapon. Because you're right, the armor you can't get through. Unless you're the people you're fighting have no armor, then it's different. Yeah. But if you're fighting a knight, a mace would make a lot more sense. An axe would make a lot more sense. Yeah, like a blunt weapon, yeah. Maybe a spear. I don't know if a spear would go through armor. Probably not. I just don't see
Yeah, I just don't like the sword is like kind of like almost like useless against armor. I feel like.
On those full plate armor, from my understanding, yeah, but then again, most people weren't wearing that because it's expensive and
True.
costly. So it was like
Probably most medieval warfare probably took place like knights killing peasants. Like that was probably a lot of unrecorded history there because what are you gonna do? You're a peasant. You got a pitchfork.
Yeah.
You ever play one of those games where like you're a knight and you got to fight the other person's arms with a bunch of pitchforks and a lot of video games are like that. It's like so much easier to, that's exactly what's happening. You just like butcher them like nothing.
Yeah, what a different era. I mean, like whenever I watch movies like Braveheart or something, and you see those giant battlefields, and you just think from the perspective, I'm just this one little dude with my pitchfork against a legion. Like, how the hell do you think you're gonna get out of this thing alive? It seems totally nuts.
No, I think that back in the day, an army with knights in armor would be a terrifying thing. Movies make it look like, oh, it's an equal playing field. I think in reality, it'd be like you're doomed. Like, what are you gonna do?
Yeah,
you can't. You can't. Like you're done. You cannot win. Like one knight will take out 10 people. Yeah. Right? Unless you could, on a horse. I mean, drag them down from the horse. I guess would be the only strategy. But like cavalry would have been terrifying.
It must have been. Yeah.
I was reading a book a while ago, and it was talking about how the transition from the cavalry fighting style into modern warfare, right? Where machine guns were being used during World War I. And one reason why the Brits were having such a hard time defeating the Germans was because the Germans abandoned the cavalry. This is not working. Let's get a machine gun out. This is a weapon that nullifies cavalry. Where the British, out of either their pride or previous experiences fighting other people who didn't have machine guns, they kind of stuck to the old ways. It's kind of like Blockbuster trying to beat Netflix. It's one of those things. Like it's not going to happen, my friend. You're going to lose that fight. But the Brits were adamant about trying to defeat the Germans with cavalry. They insisted for a long time, and at some point they finally stopped. But it was one of the reasons why, for a minute there, Germany actually had the overhand in the war.
That's crazy.
Yeah. It's funny that people stick to strategies that aren't working. We all do it. We make fun of Blockbuster trying to, can't keep up with Netflix. But I think we all do it. I have my own ways of doing stuff, and I just like refuse to change, even though like I see that, okay, I know there's a better way. Probably is an easier way, but it's too hard to change. It's just easier to stick to what you know.
Yeah, like you said, you have a kind of a attachment to it, and there might be an ego challenge involved, because what I always tell people, my perspective is change is difficult, not because the actual changes. The change is simple. It's instantaneous when you decide to change the way you do something. It's letting go of the fact that you've been doing something wrong for X amount of years, and now you're going to admitting, well, I was wrong, and essentially I'm stupid for like 20 years, so now I'm going to accept this change. No, I'd rather believe that I'm not stupid, that there's merit to what I've been doing, because otherwise, how do I look back at these 20 years and look and
That's
be,
a good point.
Like I feel a lot of people hang on to their mistakes for that reason, because the moment that they change, it's admitting there was a mistake made, and like a lot of people's ego won't support that.
That makes perfect sense, because I can see, even speaking for myself, I can see I think that makes a lot of sense. It's too hard to admit when you're wrong about something, especially if it's something that you've been any kind of mistake you've been making for a long time. I'm trying to think of an example in jiu-jitsu here. I'm sure there's a few, where you're going for a pass in a certain way and you just don't want to change because that's the way you've always done it, and like someone's doing something different. But I think it's interesting. That's where the new generation of people, I give young kids a hard time all the time, because to me they're just like, you guys are spoiled as it gets. And I do sound like grandpa, but I don't care, because it's how I feel. They think the millennials are very, very spoiled, and everyone wants to get rich without working. Like everyone wants to be an entrepreneur, and I hate that shit. Like, get to work, man. You gotta grind. You're not gonna, But I think the one thing that throughout history the younger generations have always done is that they always think of easier ways of doing things, better ways, more efficient ways. Because as we get older, we get set in our own ways, and that's why we need a young 20-year-old kid who's going to challenge your De La Riva sweep and come up with a berimbolo. Because if these things aren't happening, we're stuck. So in a lot of ways, younger generations, by challenging the old ways, they're reinventing the sport, they're reinventing the art. And this happens everywhere. Technology, every sport, every
Well,
endeavor, really. Looking at better ways of doing something. Whereas older generations get set in their own ways, old ways.
You're absolutely correct. And I think, well, the signs of people who are very intelligent and very wise are ones that constantly are adapting, that they never get set. But I think for the most part, most people at a certain point, they feel like they're done learning or they're done like innovating. Like I've made my castle and now I'm going to stay here.
Yeah.
And that, even though that castle kind of protects you, it also limits you because you can't grow beyond the walls, right? So I think intellectually it's kind of the same thing. Like you have a way of thinking and it's worked for you and it's achieved a certain level of success, but then at a certain point you stop and now you cement yourself, you plant your roots, so to speak, but at that point you can't really grow much further. Whereas someone who's young or maybe who's lived in the castle, like your kids and whatnot, they're like, okay, this is nice, but I want more now.
Yeah.
They're the ones that are able to push the envelope, even though you might be thinking like, you don't know what you're doing, kid, but like, you need someone who thinks outside that box to be able to expand it because you're stuck in your ways and you're not going to change.
I think that a lot of like technology companies, they they want to hire young kids because they have that. Either way, it's the ambition or the vision, the plasticity of the brain when you're younger. Maybe I think that when you're younger, you're more creative in a lot of ways. It's weird how this happens. As you know, I'm not as old as I'm gonna sound right now. I'm 38, but I remember when I was like in my early 20s, or like even before that. When I started at 16. When someone showed me a move, like visually, I can conceptualize, I could absorb that move, and nothing was difficult. When someone showed me something, it was always like, got it, like Neo. Like my brain was absorbing information so much easier. As you get older, it gets harder to absorb that for some reason. That's why I think that it has to do something, I don't know what happens, but like languages, it's like that. The older you get, the harder it is to learn a language, right?
Yeah.
And when I was younger, like, and I never had a hard time learning the move, Dave. It was always like, got it. There was no such thing as, except hip throws. I never got hip throws. But, like now, every now and then I see some of these like crab ride transitions at the back and back to a berimbolo, and I'm like, wait a second, slow that down. And like I have to watch it like 4 or 5 times, and it's harder for me to absorb it. And it's not just because it's more sophisticated. That's not the reason. I really believe that's something to do with, as you get older, your brain is just less of a sponge. It's harder to retain that information or make sense of it. Or maybe your girlfriend will have a better explanation. She's a psychiatrist, probably studies a lot. Knows a lot about plasticity of the brain.
I would say from a philosophical standpoint, if you've read the book, The Four Agreements.
I've heard of it.
Great book from Del Miguel Ruiz. And it's essentially, there's 2 books I think everybody should read in life. That's one of them, and I believe that's a good handbook essentially for teaching you how to live life stress-free, or as stress-free as possible. And then the other book is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. That's a success.
What's it called?
Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And that's a book for success. And even though it says rich and you think, oh, it's about money, it doesn't tell you stock tips or how to make money. It just tells you how to be successful. And it's got 13 principles to teach you how to do that. But with the 4 agreements, the start of the book essentially says that when you're first born and you first achieve consciousness, essentially there is infinite possibilities of what you can do in life because you don't know the rules. You essentially are like a blank slate. So like a child sees somebody flying in a movie, like, oh, I could fly. They don't know they can't until like they try.
Yeah.
So infinite possibilities creates near infinite imagination, right? You can imagine just about anything. As you get older, you start learning things. And every time you learn something, essentially you create an agreement with yourself that this is not possible or this is possible. And the analogy he uses is like a door that's wide open when you're a child. It's full of light. And then as you get older, the door starts to close. Because all the possibilities are starting to get narrow. Because now well, I can't fly, and I can't play piano, I can't do this, I can't do that. So I think that could factor into like how come as you get older you start losing imagination or you stop being able to be creative because you've learned so much. It's limited you now because your knowledge kind of burdens you.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Whereas when you're younger, like, why can't you do it? Like, I guess he said one of the experiments, if you ask a kid, can you play the piano? He's like, oh, let me find a piano. If you ask like an older person, like, can you play a piano? It's gonna be yes or no.
Yeah.
Either they've played it or they haven't played it, and they say, no, I don't know how to play it.
Yeah.
Right. So
I think there's something more adventurous about a child's nature too, where they're excited to see the world in a way that we're not. My daughters wake up at 6 a.m. They wake up at 6 a.m. They're excited about. They don't want to go to sleep either. And I'm not. Like, I want to stay in bed for as long as I can. Like, I'm not that excited about the world anymore, right? And I think that either as we get older, my frustrations and some, life is about. There's a lot of suffering in life too, and there's a lot of frustration that comes from that, and that creates all sorts of other issues. And I think people at some point they start like becoming less adventurous, right? And we start losing that for whatever reason. And I think that there's some fears that are created at some point. Oh, I failed at piano, so I'm not going to try the guitar. Probably the best example. But like, I think people start like getting in their heads that they can't do stuff. Whereas you're right, if you have a child, you play the piano, the child like, yeah, give them the piano. They go like that. Then in their head, they're playing. They don't know how to play, like in the sense that, but like they would play the piano in the way that, yeah, I'm playing with the piano.
Yeah.
Right, but the children don't get scared and intimidated about just about anything.
No.
Like that's always like trying stuff. I'm not talking about like, I think everyone's terrified of spiders. But like, they're giving things a go. Like you can't intimidate my daughters into not trying a new game, not trying a new instrument, not trying a sport. It's just no, I'll do it. Yeah. And that we lose that, I guess, as we get older.
I think it's a learned behavior, right? Pretty much based on the responses of their life. Like if they went to do the school play and then they got humiliated, then it's gonna
exactly. Yeah.
Then now that door closed, right?
Yeah. That's exactly that. You gave the example. You get humiliated at something. If you try out, I'll give an example. I did a Hapkido competition, and when I was like 8, 9 years old, it was the first martial art I've ever practiced, and it didn't go well. I got my butt kicked. But for some reason, I felt like people were making fun of me, and it kind of created a mental block in my head in a lot of ways. Like I didn't want to do anything competitive for a long time. It was only when I found jiu-jitsu that I wanted to do things competitively again. I did one mountain bike race when I was like 16, I think. That was it. I just didn't want to do anything competitive. And then at some point, I kind of snapped out of it. But I remember for a long time, it's just because I associated competition with humiliation.
Yeah.
And I think some people just never, like jiu-jitsu kind of saved me that way, whereas now like I love competition. But it becomes a block for a lot of people, I guess.
For sure. Before I started doing wrestling and whatnot, I was dreadfully shy, extremely. And the same year that I started wrestling, I remember I read an English paper in front of a 20-person class, and I had to stand up and hold the paper. And all you could hear is the rattling of the paper because my hands were shaking. I was like,
that's funny.
And it's so embarrassing. Like looking back, oh my God! Like I was just reading like one paragraph. Yeah. I was just so dreadfully shy, And why? The fear of judgment. Because that's what pretty much everybody's worried about for the most part, right? Like in social situations, you fear you're gonna be judged negatively, right? Like people are gonna look at you. Oh, he's a loser. He's stupid. He's weak. Fill in the blank, right? Yeah. Whatever you're scared about. But like it's a fear of other people judging you. I think what competition starts bringing out of you, particularly the martial arts, is that you stop focusing on everybody else and you start focusing on yourself. And now, once you're your own judge, then and you don't care about what other people think, it's very liberating. Because then you can just do whatever you want, and you don't have to worry about external like voices.
So you got to learn how to not give a shit.
Yeah.
Basically, and I'm good at that for the most part. But there are parts of me that worry about what people think, some things more than others. But for the most part, like I live like that. I have that in my head, and like for the most part, I don't care. But I think there's always some things that we care about, what people are going to think. The trick is to get rid of that, because those are the things that hold you back. It really is fear of judgment.
For sure.
Right? What are people going to think if I get it wrong, if I fail, if I lose, if I look stupid, if I sound stupid? I was that guy too. I was very shy. It's interesting you say that, because I think your story of like hearing like the paper
That's what I
rattling,
remember
like
that. Yeah.
I not that bad, but like probably like a little bit better than you. But I was super shy, and I didn't like to be around, like talk to like large groups of people. Like standing in front of a classroom was terrifying.
Yeah.
And now to the point, we do the same thing. We teach seminars. It's like it's second nature.
Yeah.
Like there's not, my heart rate does not go up one bit. I guarantee you. But I can get in front of an audience of 50 people or 5,000 people. It makes no difference to me. I have no issues talking to people. But I truly believe that jiu-jitsu did that. Maybe teaching class, I guess, got rid of that, solved that problem, because you're talking to people. You have to teach class.
Yeah.
It's an audience of like 20, 30 people. You got to, and then it just becomes second nature. It was a great scoop to, lose that fear.
Well, the thing I learned about it, because it's what you said, like when you start doing jiu-jitsu and you start teaching classes, I don't know, for me it was pretty easy when I started teaching class, right? And like, how come it's easy to do it in this context where I'm in the mat teaching people, but when I was in school and I was doing a presentation, I was terrified, right? And the difference was confidence, right? And I think most part, like when you're in school and you're doing a presentation, I think most people are very unconfident what they're doing. At least me, because I was BSing a lot of them.
You're trusting memory a lot. You don't understand the topic. You're relying on memory.
You're relying on memory. So you're like, I'm talking about something I really don't know. I'm just pretending that I know.
Let's talk that no one notices that I don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah. You're thinking about that?
Yeah. Don't ask me the right question because you're going to nail me. But like when we're in your element in jiu-jitsu, it's like, you can't bust me, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm very confident what I'm doing. And so much so that if you did find something, I'm genuinely interested. Like, okay, how did,
You said it. Yeah.
It's not going to bother me because I don't feel weak. I'm not unconfident about my martial arts. I'm very confident about it.
Yeah.
So if you had something that brought something out of me, now we're going to learn something together, or I'm going to learn something, right? But like when we're in school and you're doing presentations on like 2 days notice and you're jerry rigging something together, you're not confident at all, and the consequences seem to be a lot more stark when you're being judged by grades A, B, C, D, E, F.
That's a really good point. I think a big part of the shyness came like I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
So like if you know what you're talking about, you're not as shy. Like that's why like if you ever want to get a kid out of their shell, you talk to them about what they like, right? Like actually, one of the guys that was working in one of my houses, he was telling me about, I think I mentioned it before, about his son. His son was, very shy, he didn't have friends and whatnot. And he was talking to his son on the phone, and I had given him some advice about weightlifting for his son. And then the son heard about it and goes, "Oh, is that David? Can I talk to him?" I'm like, "I'm talking to a kid I never met before." But what do I talk to him about? About weightlifting, because I know that's what he likes. And then he was asking me all sorts of questions, stuff. He didn't seem shy, right? But I'm speaking to him on his element, right? It's just like if I was going to talk to somebody who is a nerd who played games, I'm not saying that negatively, but who was playing video games all the time.
We played Dungeons and Dragons when we were kids.
Yeah. I'm super nerd. Yeah.
We're nerds.
Yeah, if you say I just built a new computer there, I turn the camera around, you see it looks ridiculous, all right? But if I try to talk to that person about girls or dating or social stuff, they might be like, I don't know.
They lock up,
that, right? Yeah, but talk to me about whatever video game. And there's one that's famous. I don't even know it now.
I think people have been using this trick with me my whole life. I just realized I'm the awkward guy because
they talk about what you like, right? And then
all the time.
And then you're comfortable. It's like, I know this one. Like this is the one I got. I can talk about this. Without,
like my life's been flashing before my eyes right now. I remember like so many situations. I'm normally in the jiu-jitsu MMA bubble, right? So I'm always confident. People know who I am. Every now and then I'm in an environment where no one knows a thing about MMA, no one knows a thing about BJJ, no one cares.
Yeah.
And I'm always super uncomfortable, right? Just the dynamics just change dramatically. Plus, like maybe I'm spoiled. I'm used to being the boss.
Yeah.
I'm in the gym all the time. Like people know who I am and everyone respects me. You go to an environment, no one knows who you are. You don't get that. It's a different kind of feel, which is good. You should get that reality check. Like sometimes you get in your head and like start thinking you're, more than you actually are. So I like to throw myself out there. But it's interesting because I think people notice that I don't know how to talk about anything but fighting. And they immediately say, "Oh, how long you been doing UFC?" And I'm like, you have no idea about anything about the sport, but at least like, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Now you can, I can actually be part of the party. But I think that people that get too into things like jiu-jitsu and may become like that. Like there are very other things. I mean, I like my books. I like history. I like some other topics. I talk about politics all day. But for the most part, like, I'm not good at small talk. I'm just not good. It's like people start small talking me at a party. I'm like, no fucking idea what to say. Everyone laughs. I'll laugh. Like, I'll be the last one laughing. I'm that guy. I can't even keep up. But yeah, it's interesting. Like, because that's exactly what you should do to bring someone out of their show, I guess. Is just make them comfortable.
Yeah, just get them talking about what they like to talk about.
Yeah.
What they're into, what they're passionate about. And then you can draw them out of their bubble. And once they're out, you'll find then you can pull them into other things that they normally wouldn't get into because they would be afraid of being judged. But now that you've already seen that they have competency in one area, they're not as shy to learn about something else, particularly if they're competent in something that you're not.
Yeah.
Because now they're like, oh, I'm an expert in this. So it's okay for someone to know something more about something else.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I hang around my girlfriend all the time. She's a psychiatrist, very smart. And she's not like your typical doctor. Like, she knows about everything. And she's like, she has diagnosed 3 different people in my family my dad who ended up having cancer that nobody knew before she figured it out. My grandmother had some imbalance that doctors weren't able to figure out, and she figured out over the phone. Like, she's like, I call her House, like Dr. House, because she could make these diagnoses out of thin air. But if I try to talk to her about medical stuff and try to act like I know what I'm talking about, it's ridiculous. Like, I know nothing. But
yeah, she'll pick you apart. Yeah.
Yeah, and occasionally I go with her. Like, she goes to office meetings or whatever. A lot of doctors, and I'm coming in here, a martial arts guy. I mean, I have an engineer degree, but like, I know so little about electrical engineering, even though I graduated. I was top of my class, but I was just one of those guys that could memorize things exceptionally well.
That's
but
funny.
It's serious because there's stuff going on here that, like, wiring problems. And, like,
I
my girl was like, "Aren't you an electrical engineer? Like, isn't this your
what
thing?"
you do?
I'm
Yeah.
like, that was like 20 years ago, and I didn't really know it.
Yeah.
I can learn anything fast.
I like that, like, meeting people. Like, if sometimes, like, I'll be like going back to like a new environment, right? Which I enjoy doing. I like the challenge. It's always easy for me because I can be the guy bombarding you with questions too. If you have an interesting job,
Yeah.
like, I can bombard your girlfriend with questions all day. She'd get like, please stop asking me questions, right? The other day I was out for dinner. I was at a seminar, and there was, like, sitting across the table was a doctor and a physicist right across the table from me. I'm like, oh,
Interesting.
we were talking all night. I just would stop asking these guys questions, right? Things that I don't know, because I'm generally interested in things and a little about these things, but they're very interesting to me, right?
Yeah.
So it has to do with, like, what kind of environment you're into. Like, that's the other thing. I think sometimes we end up putting ourselves in environments where we don't have anything to learn anything about. It's like that old saying, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah.
Right? And I actually really enjoy being in an environment where, like, I would love to go to a party like that with all the doctors. I just probably worry a little bit that I'm asking a lot of stupid questions. But to me, they're not stupid because I don't know them, right? But I can literally just, like, bombard someone with questions about the medical field all day. Right. I love the topic. It's just, I
always tell people,
it's very loaded.
This is a thing I always say at every seminar. Like, when people start asking questions, like, look, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Only stupid people. Okay, ask your question.
Yeah.
People are like, no, but I mean, I think you have to be able to humble yourself, right? Just like we do in the martial arts. When you're going to learn a seminar, you're going to go under someone and teach. I mean, be taught, or attend a seminar. You don't want to be the guy that's judging or second guessing the coach or whatnot. You should go in there with an open mind. Okay, show me what you know, and I'm gonna just shut up and absorb everything you're saying, and then I can determine afterwards, was this legit knowledge I can use, or is this stuff that maybe it's not gonna use?
That's a super important ability to develop. I feel like some people lose that, and it's interesting to me because I brag about having an eye for fighters, and I think that a lot of times, whether I realize it or not, is I'm looking at, like, personality traits, and one of them is curiosity. I noticed that, like, for example, I got some MMA guys that come to the gym. I started an MMA program again recently, and some of the guys are coming in, and I just feel this guy, I'm never going to be able to help this guy. It's like you tell them to do something, and they're, like, immediately either challenging you and telling you to do it different, or that this way is better. This is how there's a reason why he can't do it my way, right? For example, and I'm like, okay. And I always notice that the ones that are all constantly making progress, they go, They're really paying attention, and then you see them trying what you just showed them, right? Whether it works or not is a different story, but they're constantly trying. And I think that's one of the most fundamental, aspects that any aspiring fighter can have is the ability to be constantly curious.
Yeah.
They're always curious about everything. You don't have to agree with everything. You can have like, okay, you do your kimura your way, I do it my way. That's fine. That's normal. But like you have that curiosity of going, what is that? Like, why this way? Why not this way? Ask the question and see if you can relate to it enough to absorb new knowledge, right? Versus that guy's full of pride. Is like, no, I do it this way. Yeah. And they're set in their ways. A lot of instructors are like that. This is how you do a De La Riva. Imagine if people were doing that never changed, right? Imagine that people weren't challenging that. We wouldn't have Birimbolos now, right? So you need to be that, like going back to the curious mind of a child. You got to be questioning, not in a disrespectful way, but in the back of your mind there's got to be a why. Yeah. Why this way? Why? Okay, what are you doing, right? The exchange of information you're just telling me about a second ago. That's so important for people to keep. I cannot emphasize that enough.
Yeah. I've mentioned this before too, but I've had white belts. I think I told you one of my guys showed me video moves from a pro wrestling Japanese game that I use, and it works. Yeah. But like, if I would have been a little more arrogant, like, oh look, the guy told me straight up, I saw this in a Japanese pro wrestling game. Let me show you.
You immediately disqualify it.
Yeah, I would have been, no, don't waste my time. Yeah. Don't waste my time, white belt. Like, I would have lost a move that I've used a lot. Yeah. So, like you said, it's just being open-minded, let everything come in, and then process, and then decide, okay, is this useful information or not? Because at the end of the day, it's useful to learn it, to know that it exists. Correct. Right? If you don't even open up the possibility, then you just shut that door, right? So knowing something doesn't work is just as valuable, or something he says something more valuable, but knowing what does work. So, like when I go to a class to be taught, I listen to everything, even though like I remember I think the first class I did under you here, I think I was doing the seminar when they first came in, but I went to one of your classes and you were just teaching the basic stack. Yeah. I'm like, okay, I know this pass, I've done it a lot of times, but let me see how Robert does it. Yeah. Because I want to see what's different, because I know there's going to be something different, and there was something that you did different that was beneficial, that I helped make the pass better. But if I would have been like, oh, I know this already, okay, and then swing around. I see people do that, like when the instructor teaches something
blue
basic.
Belts.
They say like, okay, they're tuning off and they're talking about chatting. I'm like, if you're not pulling this off 100% every time, you should be tuning in, and even if you do, you should, because there might be something that you missed.
Or you're going to teach one day, and you want to have the option, give the options to your students. Yeah. So if you do something differently, I still want to learn, even if I don't use it for myself, because the way you do it might be the way that's going to make more sense to my student when I teach it. And it's so interesting you say that, but the guy you just described is exactly the guy. It doesn't matter how talented he is. It doesn't matter how much he trains, how disciplined he is, how all the things are in place. But there's that little component there, that deep, like way in there, the guy is arrogant. Yeah. He may be humble in the outer layer, the surface, but deep down, he's so arrogant. It's like, you can't teach me. I got this, right? And it's interesting, but I get that from purple belts, which suggests to me that it really is a personality trait, and it's like deeply seated. It's not because he actually knows, it's because in the back of his mind, he thinks, I got this, right? He's like this. It's like this supreme sense of overconfidence that they don't really see as overconfident.
I think it's actually the opposite. I think it's lack of confidence that is guarded by a display of overconfidence. Yeah. Right? Because I'm very confident in if you're going to ask me something about the Kimura, I'm extremely confident, right? Yeah. But I'm still willing to listen to anything. If someone's going to teach a Kimura class, I'm like, okay, let me watch. Yeah. You know, like if I was going to listen to somebody else's Kimura thing, I'm like, let me see what they're doing. Yeah. And see if I can find something that I could use, or maybe something that I can afterwards tell this guy, hey, adjust it this way. Like you could, if you're open to it, I can show you how to make this a little bit better. But if I was unconfident with myself and I saw like somebody teaching a Kimura, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to listen to this crap. This is my game. I know this. To me, that's showing like, I'm not that confident in it, so I have to shut it off completely. Because if I learn something from you, what does that mean about me? I've been living a lie. I'm not the Kimura master, right? Like somebody else can more than me. But like, you see, so I see somebody who shuts off. Your ego's a little fragile, right? Like they feel like they know so much they become uncoachable. And like you said, those type of people, you can't do much with them, and it makes me question why are they here then? Because if you're not willing to listen to everything your coach is going to tell you, and you're going to start second guessing him, man, that's not the guy you want to roll with.
You got to find a new coach too if you don't trust your coach. Yeah, you got to go. I agree.
That would be like going to war with somebody that you're putting their life in your hands, and you second guess her, like the general, and you second guess him all the time. It's like, dude, don't go to war with this guy.
Yeah, that's not a good idea.
He's going to give you strategies that you're not going to second guess, and it's going to cost you.
Now that you put it this way, I want to add one thing. I think I want to reword what I said. They're not. It's not that just they're beyond confident or overconfident. They're a bit delusional. There's an element of delusion there, right? Like you believe your lie so much, you've convinced yourself, and you're so comfortable around that little lie that any information that tries to penetrate through that lie and go like this is BS, you guard yourself against it.
Yes.
You shut yourself. You put this big shield, and you go, no. This is my you are questioning my entire being here. This is my character, my personality. That you, and it's too difficult to confront it, right? Like, and I've met people like that, and they're so set in their way, so confident about some things, and that just if you begin to question it, like they get really angry. They don't like to hear it. Like it's just like they have a protection mechanism against their. It's a fragile ego, I guess. It is insecurity. You're right. Like deep down into insecurity, but like they wrap it up with a lot of delusion. Like they'll distort reality to believe. I have one specific person in mind, but they'll distort reality to make themselves feel good about how the world is. And it's like, but you're living in this alternate universe. Like this is not how world is or how people perceive you or who you are.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's something people like that. Sometimes there's something off about them too.
For sure, and I've seen it, and you've seen it. It comes around a lot, and unfortunately, not everybody does the martial arts is what I would consider a martial artist, right? Like to me, someone who's a martial artist truly is always embracing new knowledge, right? They're always willing to learn to get better. It doesn't matter where the information comes from or how it was made. It's like if it works, let's apply this so we can grow. If you're worried about who the information is coming from or how it was disseminated, then you're more concerned about appearances. And again, I think it's more of a vanity thing, right? Like that's why I like Jeet Kune Do so much. The philosophy to me was very appealing. It's just like learn anything that works we use. Like that's practical. That's as pragmatic as you can get.
Correct. Yeah.
You're not trying to say, well, it has to come from this guy because he has a lineage, and like no, let's cut the crap, right? Like let's use what works, and it's going to be effective in a real combat situation. But if you're worried about people watching you, like I'm thinking this thing. I've seen people that there's a seminar going on, and they are actively showing disinterest in what's going on because other people are watching them. Right, and that they were interested. That means they're learning from this guy. He's right.
I've caught that before. Yeah,
right. So like they have to show like utter disdain.
I'm too cool. Yeah.
Like this guy is cooler than everything. He doesn't need to learn from this guy we're bringing in for a seminar or whatnot. Right. So
it's just you just made a comment a second ago about Jeet Kune Do, and I want to take you back to that because I want to ask you something.
Yeah.
I like that. That's exactly how I see things. To me, this old school, new school debate is retarded. Does it work? It's all that matters, right? It's the only relevant question in martial arts is does it work, right? And if it's working, absorb it. A guy like Bruce Lee, I feel like he was ahead of his game, ahead of his time for sure. Like he was, he saw that ground was a, essential component. And I believe he probably was a very intelligent martial artist, a variety of different ways. There's no way, in my opinion, he could have created a MMA as it is today, no matter how much thought and how much genius he may have had. He could have not have done without this. MMA could not exist without a laboratory like UFC because it's a place for trial and error. Like your experience, no matter how much of a genius you are or how much experience you actually have, you cannot account for every single little possible situation in a lifetime.
Yeah.
A place like the UFC comes along, and it's like the combined experience of hundreds, thousands of fighters. Just everyone's Everyone's adding something. Everyone's adding something to that. And even if it's just the error is a lesson, right?
Yes.
Like, this doesn't work, and then everyone's watching it doesn't work, and it never works. It never works. It gets weeded out, right? It gets cut out of the equation. But someone comes along, they do something, and it's working. It's consistently working. It's working more than the other way people are doing things. It gets absorbed. So it's a selection process. Do you think that it would be possible to ever create an efficient martial art or an efficient set of techniques? And I'm talking about, like, imagine like your Kimura game, for example, right? Could you have done that just by thinking about it without practical experience?
No, I don't think so. I think that's pretty much for everything. Like, in order to be able to put something that's practical that works without field trials, it seems ridiculous, right?
It's ridiculous.
It would be the equivalent of trusting a scientist to make a serum, like, to cure some disease without ever testing it.
Yeah.
They just, okay, here's the first batch. Go for it,
Bob. Go for it, yeah. Inject yourself with it.
What's the first thing? Has this been tested before? Like, no, we don't test things. No. We just do them. Yeah. Like, no, it's nuts, right?
This is why, to me, like, the trial and error of being on the mats every day. You learn jiu-jitsu. You don't learn jiu-jitsu by thinking about jiu-jitsu. I think it's important exercise to think about it, but the way you learn jiu-jitsu is by failing. I think failing is a key word here. It's not by winning, because winning is a pat on the back. I did so good. I'm awesome. I was flawless today. Losing is how you teach jiu-jitsu. You fail, you learn a way how not to do it. You just close that door, you move on to the next one, right? And I just don't see you creating any kind of methodology without practice. And like, sometimes, like, people talk like, oh, the theory without the practice. Like, in philosophy, they do this all the time. It's like, what is that? Like, it's just a bunch of fucking words, man. Does it work in reality? No. What are you guys talking about? Like, it's just not interesting to me. I'm all about, like, that's why I love the UFC. It's the best thing that's ever happened in martial arts. It's like, right there, guys, all the stuff the stuff you've been practicing, you thought was going to work, put it in the cage. Let's see if it works. And it doesn't. We know what works now.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what you need. And that's why there's been such a growth in the martial arts now, because we have now a testing field where we can go out and see what works and what doesn't. Because before, everybody thought their own thing was great, right? The karate guys thought karate was excellent, wrestlers thought their thing. And it wasn't until we brought them into the testing field, and now we could see, oh, you know what? It doesn't really work that way.
Yeah.
It's just like, I think we talked about before, that how we can dream stuff up, and we have, like, dream moves. I call it, like, dream jiu-jitsu. Like, I could see this will work. I'm like, okay. But then when I actually go and try, like, it can't work.
Yeah.
But you can't fully, maybe if you're like a crazy genius and you're going to account for every variable, maybe.
But a lot of experience, maybe.
Maybe, but it's really difficult.
And that's only like a unique situation. It doesn't happen all the time.
Yeah.
Like running a business, like, we try to account for every situation. And there's no way I can say, let's say I'm going to put a new business plan together. If you're a very experienced businessman, I think you can probably shut down most of the variables and, like, this is what we're going to do, and you can predict most things that could possibly happen. Or like a very experienced attorney write an agreement. I think the best attorney in the world still, like, there's still a hole in there somewhere.
Yeah.
You can't write a completely perfect contract. There's something in there that, like, someone might be able to exploit. And that's how jiu-jitsu is too. You can't, like, factor every situation. That's why it's left for trial and error and future generations to continue to test that technique and perfect it.
And I think that's why it's a great point. I think it's why people have to be unafraid to go out and try. Because failure is part of the package. And that's why sometimes, like, as a coach, it's scary to put someone in competition for the first one, because you don't know how people are going to handle that loss.
Yeah.
Right? Because if they're ill-equipped to handle loss and they lose, they might feel that humiliation that we talked about in the very beginning and just stop altogether and shy away from anything ever again. And that would be, like, the worst thing that they could do, right? Like, because now they've essentially, I consider anything that you do out of fear, especially an irrational fear, would be very debilitating towards being your growth as a human, right? Like, there could be things you should be scared of for a good reason, right? Like, I should be scared of a gun pointed at me because that could mean I could die, right? But if I was just deathly afraid of a picture of a gun, that would be silly,
Yeah.
Right? That would be an irrational fear. And if you compete and you lose and you get humiliated, that to me is an irrational thing, right? Like everybody loses. Like half the people, more than half the people in this room are eventually going to lose, right? Like out of a 60-man bracket, essentially 15 lost, right? One guy made it without losing. You know? So the majority are losing. So why are you taking it so much harsher than everybody else, right? And we have the whole judges and whatnot, but I think you have to realize that everybody loses. I think people are so in their little tunnel, they only think about themselves, and they forget that everybody has a shared experience. Because I think that's what makes it easier to take a loss, when you don't feel like you're the only one losing, right? Because people, in a sense, don't want to be that unique when it can be seen negatively, right? Like people like being unique when it's considered a great thing, right? Like, oh, you're the winner of the tournament. That's amazing. But if you're the guy that got flying armbar in 3 seconds, that's not the guy you want to be remembered as, right? And that happens. I got beat by an armbar, like I think in 15 seconds. I did one gi tournament in my life. Did I tell you this?
No, I didn't know that.
Oh, okay. So this is good.
I had no idea.
So,
because when you first came to the gym and I asked you, like, hey, man, we got a belt test coming up. Would you put a gi on? The belt test, like, Rob, I put a gi on like 3 times my whole life. I'm like, okay, he's not going to put a gi on. But you actually competed in a gi. Like, that's news. That
was one of the times I put a gi on.
So 2 practices. One tournament.
So my coach at the time, Randy, I was maybe like 4 months training or something like that. And he's like, oh, there's the state, it was IBJJF state championship in Orlando.
Okay.
2001?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, you guys should compete in it. I'm like, oh, okay. And then coming from the wrestling mindset, I'm like, well, I'm wrestling, even when I was at high school, I competed in the open division, which is men's division. I was not supposed to compete there, but I'm like, I always fight the toughest guy.
Yeah.
Like, oh, what belt we're competing in? Black belt, of course. I'm like, no brainer. I want to fight the best guy and see what happens. But you know how that is in jiu-jitsu culture. So I'm 18, my brother's 19.
You've been training for 4 months.
In jiu-jitsu, I did like 3 years of high school wrestling.
Yeah, okay.
And I go in there. And then I remember it was Paulo Castro was the coordinator of the event. And they were asking us all sorts of questions. And they're kind of I'm like, why the hell are they making such a big deal? Whatever, And when we get to the tournament, everybody's warming up. And they don't really warm up. This is 2001.
Yeah.
Everybody's just like this. And then feet twirling, right?
Yeah.
And me and my brother are warming up like wrestlers, like high crotch and double legs. And
people they thought you were crazy.
We're nuts, right? And there's a lot of noise and stuff. And then when they start calling the men's black belt divisions, it suddenly becomes as quiet as a tennis match. It's me, my brother, and then 2 other guys. And Paulo Castro was one of them. I forgot the other guy was some big dude. And I think I was the first guy to go up, maybe. And I fought Paulo. And again, not being familiar with gi, you start the match, he literally just grabs the sleeve, pulls me into an armbar, and it's like a quick tap. I'm like, oh, this is humiliating. And then my brother fought him next, and he did much better than me, but at a certain point, they were just on the out of bounds line, and my brother stepped out of bounds, and I guess he thought he was out of bounds, he stopped. And then this guy threw him on the hard court, hip throw.
Concrete.
Boom. Oh, basketball court.
Basketball court, wow.
Boom! Lands right in the solar plexus. My brother's like, TKO. So,
that's some funny shit.
Yeah, after that, I remember we walked out, and we recorded our matches.
Yeah.
And VHS.
Oh, you gotta put that on social media, man. We gotta watch that.
You gotta find the tape. And then after me and my brother watched the match, and we were at a Wendy's eating like a Frosty, whatever, and we started cracking up. Like, this is the funniest shit that's ever happened, And then like a week later, like some people, that would have ended their experience, right? Like that was my first competition experience. And both of us had humiliating losses. I got flying armbar, he got knocked out with a hip throw, And the next week I fought Pablo Popovich in a shoot fight and beat him, and he was...
Shoot fighting is in...
so it was in Florida back then. This is again.
Was that MMA rules? Like
kind of. So all the shoot, at least in Florida, there were always different rules. Like some of them were open hands.
Yeah.
You could kick a knee to the head, but only open.
I didn't know you fought Pablo.
Yeah. This is one of those. I fought Minotauro too. Actually.
Really?
Same tournament.
I didn't know that.
So I was supposed to fight somebody else, and then they didn't show up, and then Pablo was there. And Pablo was doing gi matches, and he was a brown belt at the time. So he stepped in and said, okay, I'll fight him. And this rule were pretty safe. There was no striking to the head at all. Anything goes below, elbows, punches, knees, but you couldn't touch the head. So it's like slap, kind of like EBI type thing, really, right?
Yeah.
But I remember, so I fought him, and then it was a 10-minute round, one straight 10-minute round, and I won on a decision. And I think I won because of ground pound. Because I remember I took him down, and he went into the closed guard, and he did this from his closed guard.
Yeah.
I'm like, I guess you don't train ground and pound. Because I started ripping him, and then
Did he forget that you couldn't do it?
I guess he didn't think it was a big deal or whatever.
Yeah.
But afterwards, he realized, he had to cover
Yeah.
your body, And there was some good submissions going both ways. I tried to heel hook him. He tried to kimura me, and it was a good match. It was exhausting. I remember.
So how'd you win?
Decision.
Decision?
So me, my brother, and my coach were the only 3 guys on my team. And then his team was essentially a Brazilian contingent of like 100 people there.
Yeah.
So when he lost, they did not like it at all. There was a lot of row and yelling, and people were going nuts. And then I remember it was like in the warehouse, it was ghetto thing in the weight room, and I was lying on a bench, and my coach goes to me, hey, you got one more fight. I'm like, wait, no, it was just one match. And he's like, no, you don't understand. If you don't fight this next guy, we're going to have to fight in the parking lot, because they're not going to leave without you fighting again. I was like,
So what is it? It was a one-match thing, and they made you fight again that same day, even though it was not...
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I did not want to fight. I mean, I was exhausted.
And that was Nogueira?
Nogueira, but he wasn't famous. He just fought in rings. But I didn't.
Okay, so this, what was it, 2000?
2001. So,
okay.
Yeah. So I didn't know who he was. I just saw some tall guy, and I thought he looked like this kickboxer that I saw on the local circuit. I'm like, oh, he's a kickboxer. I'm just going to take him down and ground and pound him.
Yeah.
And I shot in, got a single leg, and then it just hanged on his leg for like 5 minutes, and he was just like hitting me all over the place. Yeah. Eventually, he got a rear naked choke and tapped me out. And I was like, whatever, man. Like, that guy wasn't as good as the other guy. He was just exhausted. And someone goes, man, you don't know who that was? I'm like, who is that? That's Minotauro. I'm like,
no idea.
Who's Minotauro? Like, man, he fought in rings and stuff like that. And then I looked him up later. I'm like, oh shit, this guy next week.
And then like not long after that, he blew up on the Pride scene.
Yeah, because he used to have a school in Florida. So around then, I think he moved back, and then he started fighting more and got big in Pride. But I just remember him, and I got to train with his brother at some point, Minotauro, and he got feet like paddles, man. Like, they're so long.
Yeah.
I remember I just kept seeing feet flying at me, like triangles and whatnot. But it was like a different era, But I went from bringing it back. I went from losing like 10 seconds to like a cheap arm bar. That could have been my end of my jiu-jitsu experience. But then I went next day and I beat Pablo, and then I fought this guy Minotauro, and I went on ADCC, right? So
yeah, well, you got to find a balance, right, between like you got to care, but not care too. I think when you care too much, it's almost like, and that was me. Like, I cared so much, it's almost like a problem. Like, you got to calm the fuck down, man. Like, it's okay if you lose, right? Yeah. You got to be somewhere in the middle, and then people just don't care at all, right? You want to be somewhere, maybe not in the middle, more closer to caring, but not to the point where it's going to stop you from competing again, right? Like that's like, you don't want it to be something that just encourages you. You want it to be something that gives you, the push, the incentive to like, okay, that wasn't my day, but that guy, okay, I got to get that guy. That's the guy who beat me. I want to get him back, right? But Dave, I think it's time. I got to get going. This was a good show. I enjoyed it. I hope you guys had fun. This is much better setting. I don't know if it's the light, the space back there. I think it's the space. I like it a lot more. So.
Yeah, I think it's gonna work out pretty nice here.
Yeah, we're working on some guests here for the next few episodes, and I had a blast. Thank you, Dave. Thank you guys for watching. We got some suggestions recently, so if you guys got more suggestions, please send them our way, and share with your friends, spread the word, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care.